Welcome to the psychology section, which I will gradually introduce here on the channel. I believe it is a relevant subject and worthy of being brought to subscribers, as mental health is of utmost importance in all of our lives. That said, let's get to the point. Game psychology is the study of how games affect the mind and how they are structured to keep players engaged. Game psychology can be applied to many different types of games, including video games, gambling, and social games. Game psychology can be applied in a variety of ways, such as child development. Games like puzzles and strategy games can help develop creativity and problem-solving skills. Learning to deal with the consequences of decisions made in games can be transferred to real life. Therapy. Play therapy is a psychotherapeutic approach that uses play to help children overcome challenges. Game design. Games are designed to keep players' attention, using psychological techniques such as activating reward systems and constructing emotional narratives. Game addiction. Addiction to video games can be associated with depression and anxiety disorders. Self-control and sociability can interfere with the development of addiction. Social games. Games that allow interaction between players, such as Animal Crossing, New Horizons, may be associated with emotional well-being. Richard Alan Bartle is a British game writer, teacher and researcher, best known for being the creator of the first MUD1, and author of a seminal book on game design, Designing Virtual Worlds. A pioneer of the MMORPG industry, he developed a model of players known as Bartle archetypes. The study on the classification of player profiles began with an article written by Richard Alan Bartle in 1996. The author observed that each player performed different actions during the games of the digital game MUD, Multi-User Dungeon. At the end, the author interviewed the participants and, based on this context, described the archetypes below. Achievers. They are players who like to accumulate points, resources or items and overcome the goals that the environment provides. Explorers. They are players focused on learning and exploring the rules, mechanics, and the existing environment. Socializers. They are players who enjoy interacting with other players and being part of the stories being told. Killers. They are players who seek competition with other players, they like to overcome their opponents and be the best ranked. The big problem with anger is not the anger itself, it's what it leads to, wrote Charles Carver, a professor of psychiatry and anger specialist at the University of Miami, in 2007. Osita Nwanta holds a bachelor's degree in business administration, esports business, and wrote the thesis The Impact of Toxic Behavior on First-Person Shooter Gamers. The impact of toxic behavior affects players of first-person shooter, FPS, games by examining the planning, implementation, and the results of the survey conducted. The findings indicate that toxic behavior, including flaming, griefing, and sexism, among others, creates a toxic atmosphere that negatively impacts on players' overall experience of playing and competing in FPS games. This toxic environment can harm players' mental health and well-being, disrupt team coordination and performance, and undermine the game's fairness and integrity, reducing motivation and entertainment levels and even causing some players to quit gaming. Toxic behavior can harm the development and advancement of esports as a legitimate industry. It can damage the reputation of esports and discourage sponsors and investors from getting involved, which could impede the industry's growth. What is a toxic gamer? The gaming community has been facing a serious problem, the emergence of players who exhibit high levels of bad behavior, known as toxic players. These players negatively interfere in the experience of others, influencing them to act in the same way. What is toxicity in games? Many players are exposed to toxic behavior on a daily basis, whether through verbal aggression, online harassment, or even the simple fact of being bothered by another player while simply wanting to have fun. How does a toxic person act? A toxic person is someone who has unpleasant behavior, emotional and even physical violence, which is characterized by a relationship in which there is excessive power of one person over the other, that is, where there is no balance. You don't necessarily have to be a competitive player to come across toxic players. I'm sure that at some point, in 1 or 2 games, you've come across a player who's been following you around, or the kind of player who's always judging others and acting with false humility. But the most common type of player is the one who talks or writes a lot of trash and claims to be the victim of the other players. Back to literature. Overall, the findings of the study by Andy Przybylski and Netta Weinstein provided evidence that violent video games are not associated with aggressive behavior. There are no statistically significant links linking violent video games to adolescent aggressive behavior using the current operationalization of violent video games. Psychopathy is a personality disorder characterized by a constellation of traits including impulsivity, callousness, interpersonal manipulation, and irresponsibility. Research has identified IQ as an important predictor of violent behavior, and the question of the extent to which IQ and psychopathy predict violence independently or through an interactive mechanism has received some empirical attention. IQ has been proposed to moderate the effect of psychopathy on violence such that low IQ psychopaths present greater risk for violence than do high IQ psychopaths and high and low IQ non-psychopaths. Not all violent people are psychopaths, as psychopathy is a personality disorder that can manifest itself in different ways and is not the only explanation for violence. People with psychopathy can be aggressive and violent, but they are not always so. Psychopathy can manifest itself in other ways, such as drug addiction, homelessness, and other personality disorders. Violence can have other causes, such as cocaine or crack abuse. Most psychopaths do not have a criminal record and are present in many professions, including management positions. However, people with high levels of psychopathy may be able to control their antisocial impulses and not become criminals or violent. Conclusion. Your child, friend or neighbor will not become violent by playing video games, unless they already have a tendency towards violence due to some personality disorder. Friends. Please leave your opinion about the segment in the comments, and if you would like to see more of this format here on the channel. Don't forget to subscribe, like if you liked it, and share if you thought the subject was really relevant. Thank you.